everybody and their mother is microdosing or doing something with psychedelics. So I think that's changed a lot.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking in for our latest Trade of Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. We're talking psychedelics again. Last week we had on psychedelic advocate Zappy Zaplin as he tees up Microdose Miami and the big conference coming up in the next week and a half. Well, this week we have a CEO with one of the best thought leaders in the space as we welcome in once again to the podcast, Payton Nyquvest from Numinus Wellness, which trades at the TSX under the ticker symbol NUMI. Good day, sir, and great to have you back on the podcast.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, it is conference season, I guess, for this industry. And I think what I want to look at right now is kind of the 40,000-foot view.
Sure.
Where do you think the current state of the business is for the entire psychedelic industry?
Yeah, I think we're at a very interesting time at the moment. I think we've been through, I would call it a consolidation and education phase over the last year and a half or so. I don't think it was too long ago. People remember a lot of enthusiasm in obviously the more broader macro market, and psychedelics definitely benefited from that. And I think with that, you've now seen a period of time where companies have taken that capital and put it to work. And I would say the market's gotten a pretty deep education on just where the space is headed, how these different compounds can be used to support people's mental health, and also what the regulatory or approval pathway is. We've got the MAPS phase 3B results that are anticipated to come fairly shortly. You've got the Compass phase 3 protocol data that is going to show up, I think sometime probably next month. And then with that, you've seen it feels like almost every couple of weeks, there's some regulatory change on a state level in regards to different access points for psychedelics. Obviously there's a lot of people keenly watching the Oregon change that's expected in January of next year. And then most recently, the big one being Alberta, announcing January of next year, essentially legalizing all psychedelics for therapy. So, I think this consolidation phase has been important. It's certainly been challenging for investors. But I think we're seeing kind of the light. I don't want to say light at the end of the tunnel, but we're really, I think within the next year, you're going to see a lot of these compounds start to be put into practice and a lot of people getting the support that they need.
Yeah. All good points. So do you think 2023 is the year that we're going to see breakthrough research that's announced? As you said, the phase 3 with Compass, phase 3 with MAPS. Phase 3, obviously, it's a big step up, a big advancement for the overall industry. And we've discussed in the past about catalyst moments. We look back at 12 months ago when Compass came out during the microdose conference, and it kind of fell flat. I think a lot of people didn't really understand what the announcement made, but you anticipate a lot of breakthrough research that will be announced and what that'll mean, obviously, for the industry?
Yeah, I think the MAPS results are really probably going to be the bellwether for the space. The phase 3 initial results that were posted, which most people have seen, were like something we've never seen before in regards to mental health care. And I think the phase 3B results are going to be as good or better, probably. And probably I would anticipate show a little bit more of the kind of real world pathway. The Compass phase 3 results, without knowing the protocol design, it's a little hard to know or anticipate when those results will be posted. But I do think the trial designs will really show the kind of path to approval for psilocybin. And I think the fact that they're doing 2 phase 3 studies is really exciting, because typically two different phase 3 studies do need to be done in order to get market approval. So the fact that they're doing both of those in conjunction with each other shows that obviously they're very optimistic that the trials are going to be successful and that we're going to see psilocybin used in an approval setting through the FDA.
Can you explain in more detail? You touched on 2 trials going on at the same time to get approval. So walk my viewers through like what exactly that means and why it's necessary, as you said, to get approval.
Yeah, again, we'll have to see what the trial design looks like, but usually it's two kind of, I don't want to say competing thoughts, but just giving enough differentiation between protocol designs to get approval. So again, we'll see that very, very soon. But the fact that they're putting that amount of resources to it and that they're approved to launch both at the same time is super encouraging.
Well, as I said, conference season. It's been 12 months since the inaugural microdose event in Miami last year. Got the second one coming up in a week to a week and a half. Let's face it, a lot has changed over the last 12 months. So if there's one thing that we learned most about in this industry over the past 12 months, what would it be in your eyes?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to just what does the care model look like? What does psychedelic assisted therapy look like in a post-approval setting? I think a year ago there was a lot of emphasis on drug development, and I think investors have gotten a pretty clear look at just, what is the pathway for drug development? It's a long pathway. It's an expensive pathway. And I think we're looking at kind of a unique regulatory environment for psychedelics. Obviously MDMA is going through the path that it's going through. Psilocybin, we've got Oregon legalizing psilocybin in January. You've got some other states looking to potentially do the same. And I think we've just gotten clear on what is psychedelic therapy. What is it? What does the treatment look like?
That's the encouraging thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes it very clear. The thing that I've always loved about the psychedelic space is, the fact is more impressive than the fiction is. And if you just talk about the data and talk about the results and how these treatments are used effectively, this is like a complete paradigm shift in regards to mental health care.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing we've ever seen before. And we just have to tell those stories.
Payton, what do you think is the biggest misconception right now for psychedelics?
I think it's a couple things. I think it's obviously there's still some stigma that is attached to psychedelics, although I would say that's increasingly less and less and less. It feels like everybody and their mother is microdosing or doing something with psychedelics. So I think that's changed a lot. I think in regards to this kind of like chasing of novel compounds or new compounds or things like that, while I think that innovation is extremely important, I think it's understood that might be, a long ways away. And we have really, really good psychedelic drugs that Mother Nature has been working on for the last couple million years that work really well. And I think that's become very clear for people. And, and I feel like I say this every time that we have a conversation, but unfortunately the mental health picture continues to look worse and worse, not better. So it's time.
Think about this, and this is what I want to touch on, is the legality framework in the province of Alberta. You touched on it earlier. They announced the first Canadian province to regulate psychedelic drugs for therapeutic use, which is huge, cannot be underestimated. So again, educate our viewers on what exactly this announcement means and how it's going to impact the overall mental health industry.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for people who are interested, I'd really encourage to look at the release because they name a host of psychedelic drugs. It's not just psilocybin and it's not just, psychedelics carte blanche. They actually go through LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, DMT, 5-MeO DMT. And they've put together a pretty, I would say, rigorous therapeutic framework. We're still waiting to hear a little bit of just what licensing of centers is going to look like. But we met with the with the regulators in Alberta about a year and a half ago, and they asked us these questions, and we'd put our suggestions through, and we're super excited to see how it's transpired. And I do think this isn't Alberta as an outlier. I think you're going to see other Canadian provinces follow suit and put pressure on the federal government to make a more widespread federal change. But it's a huge step forward. And I mean, they made this announcement, a couple of weeks ago? And January. What's up?
Go ahead. No, I was going to say the encouraging thing is you and I have been talking for 18 months, and this is some of the stuff that you outlined. And sometimes you just got to see it and hear it to believe it, but it's actually happening, which is something that you've been talking about for such a long period of time. But these are big announcements that can't be underestimated, which is why I think a lot of the misconceptions you touched on before is starting to go on the away side. Why? Because people need more options. So with this announcement in Alberta, how does this impact a company like yourself pertaining to business?
Yeah, it's something we've talked about for years, and sure, it's definitely something that I've talked about, but I'm just a regurgitator for people that are much smarter than I am, and I think that comes from the diverse skill set we have around drug policy and regulation to really, really understanding psychedelics and how psychedelics are used in therapy. So I'm glad we've stuck to the approach we've taken in regards to really focusing on the service and the distribution of psychedelic therapy. I think the drug innovation and drug development side of things is important, but I would love to see more resources and more support go towards these regulation changes and just the supporting of getting these different drugs into a market that's more accessible. And I think, the things we've seen from Health Canada, as well as different states in the United States, and all the way up to President Biden and the Ministry of Health starting to talk about the wanting of MDMA and psilocybin available, is you haven't seen a lot of resistance from regulators. And I think people need to remember that.
Yeah, I think for sure. As we said before, big difference between how policymakers are viewing psychedelics in comparison to, say, cannabis, for example. It just seems like there's nothing really pushing back because there's actual data there. I want to focus on news from you last month. You announced the closing of your acquisition of Neurology Center of Toronto, which is otherwise known as NCT, which was founded by Dr. Evan Lewis, and expand your presence into Ontario. So talk further as to why this acquisition made sense for you and your company.
Yeah, the NCT acquisition was actually an acquisition we did a little while ago, but we've expanded our ketamine services into the Neurology Center of Toronto now. And I think it shows, we our continued commitment towards broadening out the indications and the use of psychedelics in healing. And I think what we've seen with neurological services, which are a huge reason for why people end up in the hospital, is that there's a massive mental health component to neurological indications. And, in the Western healthcare system, we've really compartmentalized healing. And you've heard a lot about this, but there's this really bringing back together of you can't separate the mind and the body and your mental and emotional and physical health. It's all part of, the same path that people are on. And from what we've seen, there's a huge unmet need in regards to how psychedelics could support neurological care and neurological indications.
Yeah. All encouraging news, to say the least. Last thing I wanted to touch on is upcoming Q4 financials, which takes place towards the end of next month, November 28th. And important to remind investors that this will be the first financial report since the closing of the acquisition of Novamind, which in the press release back in June was that the acquisition significantly grows your client service offerings, geographic reach, and most importantly, revenues. So how important or how are things progressing since that announcement was made back in the middle of the year?
Yeah, I mean that acquisition has been an absolutely transformational one for the company. Yeah, 100%. And from a revenue perspective, from a path to profitability, from an expertise in the use of ketamine assisted psychotherapy and other mental health services, all the way to now the greatly increased exposure we have to research through our clinical trial site management operations through the Novamind acquisition. We're now working with USONA, MindMed, a host of different clinical trial participants where we're actually generating revenue from those clinical trials. I think people will really understand the depth and breadth of what we've built, and with that, something that really no other company within the psychedelic space can say, which is a very clear path to profitability. And we're very, very proud of that. And I think it shows our commitments to building something that is lasting, scalable, and able to help and serve a lot of people.
Big things happening, right?
Big things.
Well, let's keep in touch. Appreciate, obviously, the update. And it's conference season, and it's good for the awareness of the industry. But it looks like we finally could see some breakthrough research going into 2023, which could be a monumental year. But obviously, it's still the waiting game. But most importantly, things continue to progress and move forward, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. So what'd you think of the interview? If there's any information that you want to know more of or want to learn about, then provide us with feedback by leaving a comment below. And if you like what we're producing, then feel free to subscribe to our channel, share this video with your network, and as well, click on that bell for all notifications because we would not be here without you. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching, everyone.